This is IBM Museum, and I'm here in front of my IBM Tweener system. I call it that because it runs Windows XP. It's able to get online at least to the pages where I can grab those reference, starter, and option diskette images and to put them on diskette with the installed drive. Now, there are some components that require the MS-DOS. I have this as a dual boot system because Windows XP is not able to go through and typically format a 720 KB diskette with the same ease. And there are a lot of option diskettes that are on that 720 KB diskette size just because IBM went through and used a smaller capacity when it didn't require to have a 1.44 megabyte drive, or it may have been something with also being able to be installed on the original MAL 25 and MAL 30 systems. So there is a need to go through and have that 720 KB format side and the ability to get into MS-DOS for that dual boot. Now I've had the Iomega zip drive for the parallel port, and it actually is recognized under the MS-DOS installation. And that is not true for the Windows XP side. And, you know, I also have going through, I've got now the SCSI interface zip drive that the XP operating system is able to see, but not the DOS installation. And it's kind of even ironic there is a MAL that Iomega sold of the zip drives it's called the Zip 100 Plus, and that was able to go through and be connected to either a SCSI or parallel interface, and it detected basically which one you had. Now, kind of going forward, I want to still retain the aspect of being able to access that parallel port model, and I'll do a little bit of optimization. RetroTech Chris put out a real good video that shows going through and optimizing and making that parallel port model work the best, and it's surprisingly fast. It surprised him, but I'm going to, just for the instance of the SCSI interface, I want to go through to where I even may have a choice of which drive I connect, or a drive that the single drive I connect, I want that recognized on both of the operating systems that I'm able to get into. And let's face it, this is DOS-sember. I want to show, I want to go through and work with the DOS interface here, not necessarily Windows XP in this time frame, and look at the aspect of see if I can get this working under the SCSI interface. Now, behind me, to the left in the view is the parallel port model, and to the right is that SCSI interface model. And I've got both of them connected. I have both disks in there. I'm just for the purposes of when I boot the system, I want to be able to go through and have both of them connected so I can kind of work with them and see the possibilities. And probably later on I'll go through the point of disk, if I can get the SCSI version to be able to, where I can access it, I'll go through and pull the parallel port model. So let's get switched over to the ThinkCentre here. And I'll go through, I'm going to grab the keyboard, pull it out. Okay. See, I see that SCSI select and everything as the system boots up. And then it gives me a choice of which operating system I want to boot to. And of course, it goes to a timeout period of 25 seconds to boot to the Windows XP as a default if you don't touch anything. Now this is going through and it's actually recognizing the parallel port model. Even though it's identifying that SCSI ID 6 and things like that, you know, it's going through that drive D that it has showing here is actually the parallel port model. I do have the Adaptec disk, and this is for to go through and install the Easy SCSI, and this is the DOS and Windows 1 diskette. Okay, and there's just to kind of do a quick directory listing, lots of files in there, and the Setup EXE site is for the Windows 3.1. Okay. And so I'm going to go through, and the program to run in this case is the DOS install batch file that was on the system. Now I do have the Adaptec AHA 2940, and that's the PCI model on this Tweener system. Now it's kind of interesting for the for this custom setup. Let's go through and do that first. And it asks which sort of SCSI host adapter. I went through and previously I had it selected for this version 2 host adapter that's highlighted here. Let's go through and let's check this PCI SCSI host adapter and see if it gives me the same result. Okay. And at least on that instance, it detected it. It may mean the 2940 ultra wide or some other SCSI 3 interface for necessarily that version 2, because on the previous attempt it didn't recognize it. So I ran the automatic setup instead of the custom, and it detected the appropriate adapter, and it does see that Iomega zip drive on there for SCSI ID 5, and I don't think it provides more information or anything like that if you select these devices or anything like that. Let's go through to continue. Okay, and needs to copy some drivers and utilities. And kind of interesting enough, you know, that's a different directory for this Easy SCSI program, of course, than it is for the zip drive itself. Okay, going through and copying. Okay, and it's wanting to put the entries into the config sys and probably even the autoexec.bat. Let's let it do the modifications. Okay, and tells us that the original file has been saved as config.bak. Okay, and so escape to continue. Okay, and press enter or escape to return to DOS. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, eject the diskette, and we're going to go through and to reboot this under in MS-DOS. This does take a little bit of time to boot. And I'm not sure what they're meaning by interrupting normal startup, because we should still get our dual boot prompt. Yeah, after the second time it does the splash screen. And this system is actually even more than a dual boot. I can go through and even have an image like the Kali Linux on USB. And if I do have that on the thumb drive and insert it on the machine, I can go through and it does boot from there. I'm just looking at trying to see for the messages. So it looks like for this case, I mean, I'm going through and finding both drives, both of those zip drives attached to the system. So it looks like for the SCSI ID 5, which is truly SCSI ID 5, that's how it's attached on the SCSI interface, is the first one detected. And then going through for that SCSI ID 6, that's just how it's set up on the parallel port model. So if I go through and I went to, it's showing starting with drive E. I'll have to see does D give us a valid drive? Okay. And okay. So that correlates with the port model. And then if I go to the E, that would correlate. They're not the same. That's interesting that when I went to F, that's when it activated the other drive. Host for D, okay. I'm not getting what this thing thinks it's doing. Because that will be okay. I mean, that's looking to be the model that's attached to the parallel port. Okay. No, that's the one for the SCSI interface. Okay, let's retry with the disk in there. Okay. Now if we're go to E, and it reads the same drive. That's interesting. You go to F, and that is the parallel port connected model, which was blank until I went through and, or otherwise blank. That read this text is just the text file that was on the disk with it being blank from Iomega itself. So I think I've got, okay, identifying anything for G as invalid. That's just really strange. The D and the E is the same contents effectively. And then the F is the parallel port model. And so what I'm going to do here, and I can go through and I can disconnect it in addition to, we're going to leave the SCSI interface, and I could just necessarily power it down, but I'm going to go through and I'm going to disconnect on the back of the unit, on the back of my Tweener system. Let's go through. Now, as I went through on that easy SCSI as well, I located the HA 1542, and that'll probably be the SCSI adapter that I will put, and that's on an ISA bus, into my 7588. So I know that that's there. That diskette will go through and work the same with that system as well. And then that system, of course, has the zip drive on the IDE interface. So that'll be interesting too, even for the purposes of which, you know, having those both set up, or having the ability to do 2 zip drives set up with that as well. And really for all that, the SCSI interface, I'm probably going to put that on there just for external CD-ROM, which I do have. Okay, and this is going through and booting to DOS with that parallel port connected zip drive, disconnected in this case, or not connected. And okay. And starting with drive E, one logical drive. And so if we go to D, that gives us a directory, and we go to E, and that gives us the same contents. It's kind of strange in a way, but I mean, I'd rather have it recognized twice before the aspect of not at all. So I'm happy enough with that. Now, I thought on the ThinkCentre, of course, another interesting thing would be that normally the C partition effectively is that DOS side, and then there's a D partition when you're going into the Windows XP. That's where all the Windows XP stuff is, and that partition is so large that the MS-DOS just doesn't recognize it. It doesn't see it. It's not visible there. And so that's a little bit my intent with the zip drive, is to have basically that removable drive that I can go through and to move files effectively from there, from that Windows XP side. I can go through and copy it to either the C partition, or I could go through and put it onto a zip drive and just have one zip drive connected at in that instance. So part of I mean, what I'd done previously here, you see that benchmark directory, and that was on the Windows XP partition. Couldn't see that from the DOS side. And as I prepare for the benchmarking the PS2 mols 56 and 57, that's the program that I would need. And that's the way I'm going to transfer it is by using those zip drives. And so we've got the SCSI connected zip drive working on the system. I mean, I still have to go through and I'll do a little bit more optimizations and things like that to get that nibble mode removed and get the parallel port version accessing the zip drive as quickly as possible if I have that mold connected to the system. So there's still a little bit of work to do, but I mainly wanted to look at the getting the SCSI interface set up. So I think it's been a good video for that, just running through that easy SCSI and getting the drivers on there from the DOS side to be able to recognize what the attached devices were. I could even go through and connect up an external SCSI CD-ROM and go the mechanism of having DOS recognize that as well. But that's going to be another video. I have to look inside and find out in the Tweener system. I think the drive I have in there, as most modern systems, is actually a SATA connection. And this Tweener system may actually have an IDE channel. In fact, I think at one point I went through and I swapped for the SCSI interface. In this case, I may go through and back that out, go back to the IDE interface for the CD-ROM, because then I can go through and I can get it set up under DOS easily enough for that internal CD-ROM. So that's all the things that we had to do back in the day to get devices to work under DOS. And this, with going through and working with the MS-DOS boot side of things, is enough to qualify and to flag this video as a DOS-sember video, so I can put it up under that. And I think it was informative. So if you enjoyed it, go ahead and click on that like button. And by all means, if you're not subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing and recommending it to your friends that are interested in this sort of content as well. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.